Christmas story from a bit of a different view this year, I think, from a view of the real-life challenges that Mary and Joseph were experiencing as they learnt that Mary had been chosen to be the mother of the child that was God in the flesh. A child that was fully human and fully divine, that was supernatural in conception and added humanity to himself. This eternal existence finds humanity in the womb of Mary. And for all this kind of supernatural miraculousness behind the story that we're used to hearing about, angels and all this kind of stuff, we also saw this morning that it takes place in what is very common kind of messiness, a common messiness that is sort of common to us all. And all of a sudden, a story that stretches our imagination with the miraculous nature of it, as I said, angels and virgin conceptions and all these kinds of things, all of a sudden takes on a more familiar feel with the everyday messiness of life. And whether you see Christmas as just another secular holiday to take time out of the messiness of life, or whether you see Christmas as a time to celebrate the birth of Jesus, a moment in history that this child changed everything. Changed everything on planet Earth forever. Changed how we view God. Changed how we understand how God views us and our messy lives. Or whether you sing songs like It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas, or whether you sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing, it turns out that Christmas, like God, is far more wondrous, far more thought-provoking, and also far more familiar, far more familiar to our usual experience of life than we actually thought. We often use Christmas as a time of year that gives us a way to suppress, if you like, the messiness of life. We get into these practices of giving gifts, that we actually like each other, of hanging lights and being charitable and maybe more generous to people when we see them. We tend to conceal over the cracks of our lives with the wrapping paper of decorations and lights and goodwill. It's the festive season, it's what we do. We seek to create a desired reality of peace and joy, even if it only lasts to the first ball of the Boxing Day test. We hope for a little while that the messiness of our lives can be put on hold as we just enjoy a bit of, Christmas magic. But as we've seen this morning, the Christmas story did not conceal the messiness of life. It actually came and it entered into that messiness. It encountered it and it experienced it as we experience it. And here we find something that we really do need to stop and to think about. That if the story of Christmas is true, this miraculous story, and as far as historic stories go, the gospel writers are probably the most credible historic writers going around, then we do have a moment in history that changed life on planet Earth forever, and forever changed how we view God. Christmas shapes how we view God, and it shapes our thoughts of how God views us. Christmas is about God and sinners are people who have made a mess of God's good design for life, how these two people, these two relationships are reconciled, how we can come and we can encounter deep transformative peace in mess, abiding joy in mess, unconditional love as these organizing realities, these organizing relational realities as we encounter the messiness of life. Tim Keller points out in his book, Hidden Christmas, that Christmas actually redefines kind of normative perceptions of God that have grown. Of God as a God that is so holy that he's unapproachable, that we can't approach him and he would never dream of approaching us. A God who is so holy that so without mess himself or acceptance of mess, he is of little relevance or connection to our lives, nor is he interested in them. A view of God that sees him as not only having nothing to do with our mess, but actually having no way of connecting to our lives, of understanding just how jacked up and messed up, complex and challenging life is. Perhaps, too, he's too offended by our mess to care about it. But Christmas tells us that God is with us in the mess, that he has entered into our experience of life precisely because he cares about how messed up and jacked up life is. Matthew, who is an eyewitness to the life of Jesus and everything that happened, tells us that Jesus is Emmanuel, that he is God with us. And John, he's another eyewitness to the life of Jesus, tells us that in Jesus, God became flesh and he dwelt amongst us, that he lived with us. A God who is only holy would have not come down to us in Jesus Christ. He would have simply demanded that we pull ourselves together, that we sort out our own messes, that we become moral, that we become good enough, that we become sort of worth meriting a relationship with him. But if the message of Christmas is that God was born into poverty, born into obscurity, into the grief and the messiness of life, then in Christianity, this faith that emerges out of this Christmas story, you find something that no other religion or worldview offers. You find a God who truly understands what life is like from the inside out as you experience it. The writer of Hebrews, as he reflects back on everything that Jesus has done and is and continues to do. And he says that even though Jesus rules and reigns at this current time in heaven, unseen by us, he does so in a way that sympathizes with us. He knows what life is like here on planet Earth. And that is the relational basis of us and Jesus. But Christmas, as we've seen this morning, also confronts this kind of modern idea of universalism, of relativism, that God is all accepting of absolutely everything. That all we really need to do is have a good kind of go, as good a go as we can muster, kind of maybe hold peace and goodwill all the way through to the first lunch break of the Boxing Day test. And God will be so impressed with our efforts, given how hard we have it, how messy life is, and he'll say, well done. You deserve a better go in the life to come. God accepts us regardless of our constant rejection of him, of our constant failings, of our constant kind of hurting and war with each other. Again, as Tim Keller points out in that book, A Hidden Christmas, a deity that was all accepting, a God that was just all accepting, that had this kind of elastic, never-ending love, would not have needed to come at Christmas either. This God of the modern imagination would have just overlooked evil, would have overlooked sin, would have overlooked the mess that these things create of life. And in doing so, reduce our experience of life and all its messiness as inconsequential. And in doing so, devalue the pain and the suffering that we encounter, trivializing the mess that sin has made of our relationships, of our relationship with God, of our relationships with each other. And all accepting God makes light of the fact that no amount of self-determination, no amount of gift-giving, of meal-making, of philanthropic kind of generosity has the power to transform you any longer than Boxing Day test, lunch even. No matter how hard we try, no matter how much determination, how much science, how much things we have, we still continuously make a mess of relationships and life. This kind of a God is indifferent to your sense of injustice for all the mess that has been inflicted on you by others as well. God, like this, is not sweating this stuff, so neither should you. How horrible. Who would want a God like that? But Christmas tells us that God has taken very seriously the mess that sin has made of his creation, and now he has personally come to clean it up. But not in a way that costs us, but actually in a way that messes him up. Christmas sees God enter into the world and live as we should live. Never once does Jesus contribute to the mess of life. It's his perfect story that these gospel writers have for us. In fact, he is described as he goes about life as reversing the effects of sin in people's lives as he lives, as he interacts with people. He is constantly cleaning up mess in people's lives. And yet, as the story goes towards the end, we see that Jesus is punished for all the mess of life. That is the message of Christmas. Hope and help has come not from within humanity itself, but from without. This child has come. Christmas means not just hope for the world despite all our unending problems, but hope for you and me despite all our unending failures. Another has come to provide hope, to clean up the mess for us. Christmas is a celebration of God whose infinite goodness and infinite love for us sees him come to reconcile us with his holiness, with his goodness, and save us from our sinfulness, from our mess. Christmas is the story of God with us, God for us. Christmas is God amongst us to identify with us, his people, and the mess of our lives, but not to participate in it and perpetuate it, but rather to heal it and deal with its source. It's a message of God with us that disrupts our normal experience of life with this extraordinary story, this supernatural story of a child born to a virgin. A child whose origins are divine and supernatural, but also a very ordinary child, as we have seen this morning. Born just like you and I, in a very personal way. Infinitely supernatural and divine, profoundly human. It's a birth that still 2,000 years later, a large portion of the world takes time out to stop and reflect on the significance of its meaning. Christmas, if we choose to, points us back to a moment in history when God initiates, when God moves towards us in love and humble disclosure, not as some distant deity or abstract divinity, but to be with us and to deal with all that frays life. All that frays life experiences, all that messes things up. But not merely to push them to the sides or treat them as trivial, but to deal with all that is broken within the human heart that causes us to build fences, that causes us to cease speaking to family or to wound loved ones. To bring grace and peace through this child that changes everything, whose story begins in a manger and leads to a cross, where God would eventually face the penalty and the punishment that all our messing up of things deserves. There, Jesus is messed up to the point of death, so that he could take on this decreating, this mess that we experience, so that he could take it on and take it from us. At Christmas, we see that God cares deeply to identify with our experience of life from the cradle to the grave. You see, Christmas, as I said, like God, is both far more wondrous and thought-provoking than we can imagine. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, in mess with no way of transforming it until he appeared, until this child appeared, God in the flesh, Jesus. It's a story that has shaped our thinking for centuries. This Christmas, we hope that you will pause and that you will consider a God who enters into our mess to reorder it through a relationship with him found in Jesus. Christmas is the story of reconciliation to bring us near to God so that we can live with real hope, pervading peace, unspeakable joy through unmerited, unconditional, mess reordering love. Hey, Merry Christmas, Freeway. Hope to see you all at Christmas Day here. We're getting up early, 9 a.m. I think, just for a little memorial service. Hey, let's pray. God, we thank you that you're a God who enters into our mess to do something about it, to come personally and do what we can't do for ourselves, and that is to begin to reorder and clean up our lives through your presence. We thank you that you are not asking us to do and to pay for how this is done, but this is something that you have done on our behalf for us. It's kind of the greatest gift you can ever imagine. If you are ever going to receive a gift at Christmas, it is the gift of forgiveness, of lives made clean, of restored relationship with God. And that's our prayer this Christmas, that would be the reality of everyone who's gathered here this morning. Amen.